Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Tico here with Gypsy Tarot 333, and I am just going to go ahead and jump right in, and I'm starting, this is the first video lesson for Tico's Tarot tutorial, and this one's really going to be geared at covering either for people that are already reading cards, learning cards, or really just talking about, before I even explain the deck, talking about what a tarot reading is in general and what's actually like going on before we look at all the different symbol sets, right? So if you haven't already, download a copy, PDF of the tarot tutorial. Link will be in the description. That's a free guide, and you can follow along with me here on this, right? So the very first thing that I wanted to point out to people is that as we are demystifying the tarot deck, going to be explaining it right, that the 78 card standardized tarot deck is essentially 3 separate decks with 3 distinct symbol sets and meanings and ways of interacting. So the first 22 cards, which I consider its own deck, was called the Major Arcana. Arcana being like secrets or knowledge. Major and minor not being like more or less important, higher or lower. It was looked as kind of like that as above, so below principle. So like energy patterns up here, manifesting experiences down there. So the minor arcana is the second deck, and we'll cover that. The major arcanas are the 0 through 22, and these are the titled cards. These are the ones we see in movies: Fool, Magician, High Priestess, Empress, right? And they run through their own unique, distinct symbol sets, cycles, etc. And we will be covering that in further videos. The second deck, or part of a tarot deck, you would say, is the minor arcana. These are divided into 4 suits, and we'll go over them. You have wands, cups, swords, etc. And so this is a deck that has to do more with things that are manifesting in our present day experiences. And then there is what they call the court cards. These are a page or princess of a suit, knight, queen, and king. Very similar to a playing card deck. And each one of those corresponds with one of those 4 suits. But those 16 cards kind of function independently, and there'll be a video on that also. So just the only thing I really want you to take away right now, very brief understanding that there's these really 3 separate decks that interlay. Usually when we do a reading, you can actually use any one of the 3 separate decks, or you could use them in different ways, like maybe draw 1 major arcana and then look at the minors, pull some of those to see what was like governing it, etc. I tend to shuffle them, mix them all together, and just know in my head that when things are showing up, these are the way they correspond. All right, so that's understanding that first part there. The next part of this tutorial talks about visual imagery. Okay, I have written down visual imagery, 3 layers of meaning. So when you're looking at tarot cards for doing a reading, right, there are what we would call, I'm just going to pull one here at random. I have the 4 of Pentacles. 3 layers of meaning just in a picture or vision alone, depending on the deck that you're using, okay? This is a Rider-Waite deck, based off of the Golden Dawn symbolism, which is most of where my notes come from. But right, so the first layer of meaning you would get visually, right, is what we would call practical. This is what's happening. All right, it's a guy sitting down, right, a guy on a throne, holding on to this disc. He's got a disc balanced on his head. He's got his money on his mind, maybe, right? Discs under his feet, he's firmly planted, and he's hugging onto that really tight. That's just something really practical there. We could start talking about the symbolism. Like, you could even use that just on the practical line of like, what are you holding on to in life? Like, what practically do you have on your mind? What are you holding on to that gives you, a foundation? That's an example. The second level we could look at, right, is what we would call moral or allegorical. There's always like a story or a lesson here. Wow, it's really dumb. The one that just popped into my head for this was a quote from the very first Star Wars, when Princess Leia tells Vader, the more, what does she say? The harder you grasp, the more star systems slip through your fingers. Okay, so that could be like a moral or allegorical story that goes along with this, right? And then there's a third one, the spiritual meaning, which is like a deeper meaning of the card's energy. And that one, you know, just even from the pictures, this is where maybe our imaginations kind of come into play, things along that nature. So like a deeper meaning of a Four of Pentacles energy, I guess for me, like on that spiritual sense, is if we were just really tuned inward and found like our connectedness with spirit, manifesting spirit onto the earth plane to give us like a strength or foundation. Okay. So like there's an example of how you could look at that just from the visual pictures in the card, right? And that's going to vary deck to deck, but that's something that you would look at during a tarot reading, right? I have here now for my next part what we call examples of readings. So there's some people put out cards and they'll read what I can call storylines, where they look at these archetypes and symbols and the pictures and they kind of see, oh, this leads to this, a little cause and effect, and this leads to this leads to this. There's readings that focus on like patterns and the numerology showing up, because each number is coming in succession of other numbers. So if you think of them all and running in like these circles, they'll all end up overlapping, you know? When you're reading also, there's energy readings. These are the ones I really focus on more, where you're looking at the elements that are coming up in the cards, the astrology, meaning like what planets and what signs are showing up in the cards and how those energies may or may not be like interacting and what we can learn from. And then I also had an example of a reading, Tree of Life manifestation reading. You know, like basically, I guess what I mean by that is that, and this will be a whole separate different video course to maybe cover the Kabbalah. There's also tons of great information out there for you. But like with the Tree of Life, like all the process of moving down these four planes of existence down the tree leads us to energies that manifest or materialize. So we can really use tarot readings to look at what are we going to be experiencing on the earth plane by like what energies are we manifesting, right? So, all right, there's some examples of some readings. Consulting the tarot deck. For me personally, there are no really specific methods to consulting the tarot deck. You know, some people have specific spreads that they use, or they'll have a certain ritual, etc. I have no specific methods except what connects you to your higher self. So sometimes it might just be easiest for you to sit there and go higher self, boom, and be in that spot, right? If burning some sage and incense and saying a prayer connects you to your higher self, if meditating with the cards, you know, connects you to your higher self, whatever that takes to kind of connect you out of your ego mind into your higher self. What connects you to your intuitive and subconscious part. So you have your higher self, your consciousness, but also what connects you to your intuitive. So a lot of readers will say like, oh, I only read or deal with my left hand because that's like the intuitive side, right? Or some people might say that they have their clients, you know, they'll spread out the cards all the way and they'll choose like one by one because that connects them to their intuitive sense, right? Burning sage, meditating, cutting the cards in a certain order, right? Anything like that. Also, when consulting the tarot, the only other method I would say is avoiding questions that remove responsibility from the questioner. So like yes or no questions, should I blank, or when/how long type questions. The one solution questions, that's not really, you can read those with tarot like usually pretty clearly, but it's going to miss a lot of what the depth that the reading can go, right? So a reader, since this whole video right here is just about what's going on during a tarot reading, right? For me personally, a reader would rephrase the question, right? Give me more insight into. So if you want to know, should I do this? Well, let's have more insight into if you did. Let's have more insight into if you didn't, right? What is the meaning of this versus yes or no? What is best for me, my situation, etc., right? All right, my video is flashing at me. I'm going to